I have flown into the eye of more hurricanes than I can count. Over 20 years with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, penetrating eye walls in aircraft that shook and groaned, measuring wind speeds and pressure drops, collecting information that helped forecasters predict where the storms would go and how strong they would be when they arrived. I thought I understood hurricanes, thought they were just weather, just physics, just the predictable result of warm water and atmospheric pressure and the rotation of the Earth. I have experienced the violence of the eye wall, the eerie calm of the center, the turbulence that can shake a plane apart. I have lost friends to these storms, colleagues who went up and never came down. I was wrong about what hurricanes are, wrong about everything. My name is Nolan Greer. I am 47 years old, and I am writing this from a motel room somewhere in Arkansas, as far from the coast as I can get without leaving the country. There is a storm forming in the Gulf right now, and I can feel it even from here. I can hear it in my dreams, in the quiet moments between waking and sleeping, in the pressure that builds behind my eyes when I think about what I experienced 3 weeks ago. There is something inside the hurricanes, something that is not wind, not rain, not any phenomenon that meteorology can explain. I heard it, I saw it, and I know it is coming for me. The flight was supposed to be routine. Hurricane Delilah, a Category 4 storm churning in the Gulf of Mexico, well organized with a clearly defined eye and sustained winds of over 140 miles per hour, standard conditions for a late-season Atlantic hurricane. We had flown into dozens of storms just like it. The crew consisted of 5 people. Captain Webb Hollister as pilot, a veteran with more hurricane penetrations than anyone else in the program. Lieutenant Diana Okonkwo as co-pilot, young but talented, one of the best stick handlers I had ever worked with. Tech Sergeant Roy Fitch as loadmaster, a quiet man who had been doing this job for 15 years. Dr. Maureen Calloway as the onboard meteorologist, brilliant and intense, always pushing for one more data point. And me, Nolan Greer, flight director, the one responsible for coordinating the mission and making sure everyone came home safe. We took off from Keesler Air Force Base just after noon, heading south into the Gulf where Delilah was intensifying. The flight plan was routine: penetrate the eye wall, take readings in the eye, penetrate again on the way out. We had done it dozens of times. The approach was rough but manageable. Delilah was well behaved for a storm of her size, the turbulence predictable, the eye wall clearly defined on radar. We hit the wall around 1:30, the plane shaking and bucking as it pushed through the barrier of wind and rain that surrounded the calm center. Then we broke through into the eye, and everything changed. The eye of a hurricane is supposed to be quiet, calm, a cylinder of clear air surrounded by walls of destruction. I had been in dozens of eyes before, had felt that strange peace that existed at the heart of chaos. Delilah's eye was not peaceful. The air was still, the sky was clear, but something was wrong. The crew could feel it, a pressure that had nothing to do with the barometer, a weight that seemed to press against our minds. And then we heard the sound. It came through the cockpit speakers, through our headsets, through the very walls of the aircraft. A sound that was not wind, not thunder, not any mechanical noise I could identify. It was low at first, almost below the range of human hearing, more felt than heard. But it rose quickly, filling the cabin, drowning out everything else. It sounded like voices, thousands of voices, all speaking at once in a language that I did not recognize. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, from inside the hurricane and inside our own heads. It resonated in our bones, vibrated in our teeth, pulsed behind our eyes. The crew looked at each other with expressions of confusion and growing fear. Dr. Calloway was the first to speak. She asked if anyone else heard that. Her voice was shaking. Her face was pale. Everyone heard it. Everyone felt it. The sound was not a hallucination, not a trick of the wind. It was real, and it was getting louder. I tried to focus on the instruments, tried to do my job, take the readings we had come for, complete the mission. But the sound made it impossible to concentrate. It seemed to have a rhythm, a cadence, like speech or chanting. The more I listened, the more certain I became that there were words hidden in that noise. Words in a language that predated human civilization. Captain Hollister made the call to abort. We had been in the eye for less than 2 minutes, but something was clearly wrong. He turned the plane toward the eye wall, aiming for the quickest route out of the storm. The sound intensified. It became angry, urgent, as if something knew we were trying to escape. I felt pressure building in my skull, pain blooming behind my eyes. Lieutenant Okonkwo started crying. Roy Fitch was praying under his breath. We hit the eye wall at full speed, the plane shuddering as it punched through the wall of wind and rain. The sound cut off immediately, as if someone had thrown a switch. One moment it was overwhelming, all-consuming. The next moment, silence, except for the normal roar of the storm. We flew out of Delilah without speaking. No one said a word until we were back on the ground, back at Keesler, back in the briefing room with the door closed. Then we tried to make sense of what we had heard. The official report attributed the experience to infrasound, low-frequency vibrations generated by the storm below the range of normal hearing, known to cause feelings of unease and even hallucinations. It was a reasonable explanation, a scientific explanation, an explanation that everyone wanted to believe. I did not believe it. I had experienced infrasound before. Every hurricane hunter had. It did not sound like voices. It did not feel like being watched. I started reviewing the flight recordings. Audio from the cockpit, from the instruments, from the various sensors that monitored conditions inside and outside the aircraft. I listened for hours, searching for evidence of what we had heard. I found nothing. The recordings showed normal storm noise during the eye wall penetration, then silence when we entered the eye. No voices, no chanting, no sound at all. That was wrong. I knew what I had heard. The others knew what they had heard, but the recordings showed nothing. I contacted Dr. Calloway, asked if she had found anything unusual in the meteorological readings. She had not. Everything about Hurricane Delilah was normal except for what we had experienced firsthand. She told me she was having trouble sleeping. She kept hearing the sound when she closed her eyes, kept feeling the pressure in her head. She had requested a transfer off the hurricane hunting team. I understood. I had been having the same problems, nightmares filled with that impossible sound. waking up with the taste of salt water in my mouth and the feeling that something was watching me from very far away. I started researching, looking for other reports of strange phenomena inside hurricanes. I found more than I expected. Reports going back decades, scattered through archives and databases, most of them dismissed or ignored. Pilots who heard sounds that could not be explained. Meteorologists who detected anomalies that should not exist. Survivors of hurricanes who spoke of voices in the wind, of something moving in the eye, of experiences they could not describe without sounding insane. One report particularly caught my attention. It was from 1969, filed by a hurricane hunter named Lieutenant Commander Willis Crane after a flight into Hurricane Camille, one of the strongest storms to ever hit the United States. Crane described hearing voices in the eye of Camille. Thousands of voices, speaking in a language he did not recognize. He described feeling watched, feeling judged, feeling that the storm was not just weather, but something alive, something ancient, something hungry. Crane's report was buried, dismissed as stress-related. His career ended shortly after, officially due to medical reasons. I found his obituary from 1982. The cause of death was listed as suicide. There were other reports, other pilots, other storms, other encounters with whatever lived inside the hurricanes. Most of the witnesses had similar fates. Medical discharges, early retirements, unexplained deaths. I realized I was not the first to hear the sound, and the people who had heard it before me had not fared well. I tried to contact the surviving members of my crew. Captain Hollister was on administrative leave, reportedly suffering from stress-related symptoms. Lieutenant Okonkwo had been hospitalized after a mental health crisis. Roy Fitch had requested an immediate transfer and was not returning calls. Only Dr. Calloway was still available. She agreed to meet me at a diner near the base. She looked terrible when she arrived. Pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes that suggested she had not slept in days. She told me she had been researching too, had found the same reports I had found, the same pattern of encounters and tragedies, and she had found something else. The storms that contained the sound were different. They caused more damage than their wind speed should allow. They killed more people than the forecasts predicted. They seemed to target specific areas, specific communities, as if they had intent. Dr. Calloway believed the sound was not a byproduct of the hurricane. The sound was the hurricane. The thing that made those sounds was creating the storms, using them, riding them to shore for purposes that no human could understand. We went back through historical records, comparing the locations of landfalls to the locations of reported encounters with the sound. We found connections that should not have existed. The Great Galveston Hurricane of 1900. Reports of fishermen hearing voices in the wind before the storm hit. Over 8,000 dead. The deadliest natural disaster in American history. The Okeechobee Hurricane of 1928. Survivors who spoke of something moving in the eye when it passed over Lake Okeechobee. Over 2,000 dead, mostly migrant workers, whose bodies were never recovered. Hurricane Audrey in 1957, Camille in 1969, Katrina in 2005. Every major hurricane that caused catastrophic loss of life had associated reports of the sound, of the voices, of something inside the storm that was not wind. Dr. Calloway had a theory. She believed the sound was the voice of something that lived in the deep ocean, something that had been there since before humans existed. The hurricanes were how it fed. The storms pulled water from the ocean, carried it to land, dropped it on communities. And when the water receded, when the floods drained back into the sea, they carried something with them. Bodies. Thousands of bodies over centuries returned to the ocean by the storms that killed them. The thing in the hurricanes was harvesting. The storms were not natural disasters. They were hunts. Hurricane Delilah was going to make landfall in 48 hours. Category 4, projected to hit somewhere along the Mississippi coast. Storm surge of 15 feet or more. Mandatory evacuations already in effect. I tried to warn people, contacted my supervisors, tried to explain what Dr. Calloway and I had discovered. They listened politely, then suggested I take some time off. The stress of the job, they said. It got to everyone, eventually. I contacted the media, local news stations, weather blogs, anyone who might listen. No one took me seriously. I was a hurricane hunter, claiming that storms were alive, that they had intelligence, that they hunted human beings. I sounded insane. Dr. Calloway tried the scientific community, reached out to colleagues, to researchers who studied hurricanes and ocean phenomena. She was dismissed, mocked, accused of letting fear overcome her training. The evacuation continued. Most people left, heading north to shelters and relatives and hotels. But some stayed, just as some always stayed. The estimates said 30,000 people would be in the impact zone when Delilah came ashore. I decided to stay too. Not because I wanted to experience the storm, not because I was curious or brave or stupid. I stayed because I needed to know, needed to see for myself what happened when the thing inside the hurricane reached land. I found a concrete structure, an old Coast Guard station built to withstand Category 5 winds. It was in the evacuation zone, officially closed, but I had been around long enough to know where the keys were kept. I stocked it with supplies and settled in to wait. Dr. Calloway refused to join me. She was leaving, getting as far from the coast as possible. She told me I was making a mistake, that hearing the sound once was already dangerous, that hearing it again might be fatal. I thanked her for the warning and watched her drive away. The hurricane arrived just after midnight, the outer bands bringing rain and wind that steadily intensified through the night. I sat in the darkness of the Coast Guard station, listening to the storm batter the walls, waiting for the eye to arrive. Around 3 a.m, the winds reached their peak. The building shook and groaned, but it held. The noise was incredible, a constant roar that made thought impossible. Then, suddenly, the noise stopped. The eye had arrived. The winds died. The rain ceased. And in the silence that followed, I heard the sound again. It was louder than it had been in the aircraft, more defined, more present. I could distinguish individual voices now, thousands of them, layered on top of each other, speaking in that ancient, unknown language. I went to the window. The eye of the hurricane was directly overhead, a column of clear sky surrounded by walls of cloud and rain. The stars were visible, cold and distant, indifferent to the destruction below. And in the eye, something was moving. I could not describe what I saw. It was not a shape exactly, not a form that my eyes could process or my mind could understand. It was more like an absence, a darkness that was darker than the night around it, a void that seemed to swallow light and meaning. The sound was coming from that darkness. The voices were its voice, or the voices of things that served it, or the echoes of everyone it had ever consumed. I could not tell. I could only listen, paralyzed, as the thing in the hurricane spoke. I did not understand the words, but I understood the meaning. The thing was old, older than the oceans, older than the continents, older than anything that had ever lived on this world. It had been here when the first rains fell, when the first seas formed. It had watched life emerge from the water, had watched creatures crawl onto land, had watched humans build their cities on the shores of oceans that belonged to it. The hurricanes were how it touched the surface world, how it reached beyond the depths where it dwelled, how it reminded the small warm things on the land that they existed at its pleasure, and that pleasure could be withdrawn at any moment. It was not malevolent, not in the way humans understood malevolence. It simply was, and its being required certain things. Water, wind, blood. I understood, in that moment, that humans were not the targets of the hurricanes. They were incidental, offerings swept up by accident, collected by circumstance. The thing in the storm did not hate humanity. It barely noticed humanity. We were gnats to it, microbes, creatures so brief and small that our existence registered only as a faint warmth in the cold vastness of its awareness. The eye passed over, the winds returned, the sound faded, replaced by the roar of the hurricane's second eye wall. I sank to the floor, shaking, weeping, trying to process what I had seen and heard and felt. I survived the night. I almost wished I had not. The aftermath of Hurricane Delilah was devastating. The storm made landfall as a strong Category 4, with sustained winds of 145 miles per hour and a storm surge that pushed 20 feet of water into coastal communities. The death toll was higher than predicted, much higher. Official counts said over 200 people had died, but I knew the real number was larger. Bodies lost to the flood, washed out to sea, never recovered. Bodies that would join the countless others claimed by hurricanes over the centuries. I walked through the devastated landscape in the days after the storm. Houses reduced to foundations, trees stripped of bark, cars thrown like toys, wrapped around telephone poles, embedded in walls. The destruction was familiar, the same destruction I had seen after every major hurricane. But it felt different now. It felt deliberate. Not random violence, but purposeful collection. I found Dr. Calloway's name in the casualty list. She had made it to Jackson, Mississippi, over 100 miles inland. But the storm had tracked farther north than expected, maintaining strength long past the coast. Flooding. A road washed out. A car swept into a swollen river. The thing in the hurricane had taken her. I was certain of it. She had heard the sound, had learned its secrets, and it had followed her. I wondered if it would follow me too. It has been 3 weeks Since Hurricane Delilah, I have resigned from the hurricane hunting program. I cannot fly into those storms anymore, cannot enter those eyes, cannot hear that sound, cannot face the thing that lives inside the wind. But I cannot escape it either. I hear the sound in my dreams every night, growing louder and clearer. I wake up tasting salt water, feeling the pressure in my skull, sensing the vast ancient presence that has become aware of me. I have moved inland, far from the coast, far from the hurricanes, far from any body of water larger than a swimming pool. I tell myself I am safe here. Tell myself the thing in the storms cannot reach me. But the hurricane season is not over. There are more storms forming in the Atlantic, more disturbances that could become hurricanes, more opportunities for that ancient presence to touch the land. And I have noticed something troubling. The storms seem to be tracking differently this year, curving north when they should curve east, intensifying when they should weaken, moving inland with unusual persistence, as if they are searching for something, searching for me. I do not know if I am imagining it, do not know if the thing in the hurricanes can really target individuals, can really hunt specific people. But I know what I heard in Delilah's eye. I know the intelligence behind that sound, and I know it noticed me. Listen to the hurricanes, not the weather reports, not the forecasts, not the carefully sanitized descriptions of wind speed and storm surge. Listen to the storms themselves. Listen to the wind. If you ever hear something inside the hurricane that is not wind, something that sounds like voices, like chanting, like an ancient language spoken by things that have never been human, do not dismiss it. Do not tell yourself it is infrasound or imagination or stress. It is real. It is aware. And it is hungry in ways that have nothing to do with food. I do not know what the thing in the hurricanes is. Do not know where it came from or why it does what it does. I only know that it exists and that it uses the storms as extensions of itself, as hands reaching out from the deep ocean to touch the surface world. The hurricanes are going to get worse. I have seen the projections, the warming oceans, the conditions that breed stronger and more frequent storms. The thing in the deep water will have more opportunities to reach the land, more opportunities to harvest what it needs. There is a storm forming in the Gulf right now, a disturbance that appeared off the African coast last week, already strengthening into a tropical storm, projected to become a major hurricane within days. Its track puts it on course for the central Gulf Coast, then inland toward Arkansas, toward the place where I have been hiding. Storms do not usually come this far inland. They weaken over land, lose their power, fall apart. But this one is not weakening. It is intensifying, even as it moves away from the warm water that should be feeding it, as if something else is keeping it alive, as if something inside it has a destination in mind. The sound is getting louder in my dreams. The pressure is building behind my eyes. I can taste salt water when I wake up, can feel the cold of the deep ocean even in the August heat. Something is coming for me. The thing in the hurricane has not forgotten what I saw, what I heard, what I learned about its existence. and it does not intend to let me share that knowledge with anyone else. I am writing this because someone needs to know, someone needs to understand that the hurricanes are not just weather. They are the fingers of something vast and ancient, reaching up from the depths to touch our world. They have been harvesting us for centuries, and they will continue harvesting us until there is no one left to take. I do not know if I will survive the coming storm. I do not know if there is anywhere on this earth that is truly safe from the thing that lives in the wind. But I know. I heard its voice. I know I saw its face. And I know that once you have been noticed by something that old, that powerful, that fundamentally indifferent to human life, you can never truly escape. The hurricane is coming. I can feel it getting closer, can hear the sound building in the distance like thunder that never fades. When it arrives, I will listen one last time, and then, one way or another, the sound will stop. I only hope that someone finds this, that someone reads these words and understands what I am trying to say. The hurricanes are alive. The wind has a voice, and if you listen closely enough, if you are unlucky enough to hear what I heard, you will understand that we have never been alone on this planet. Something has been watching us from the storm since the beginning. Something patient, something eternal, something that will still be here long after the last human being has been swept away by the wind and the rain and the endless, hungry sea. Listen to the hurricanes and pray you never hear them answer back.